the idea of Trump coming in and cleaning house and Elon Musk with the Department of Governmental Efficiency, that they'll want to do all these things, but then they'll meet this bureaucratic machine that won't allow it to
Hmm.
happen. But what I'm kind of surprised about is that we're seeing, in my opinion, not a lot of
Yeah.
resistance from the
Right.
establishment. Trump and Elon are coming in like a wrecking ball and just putting these agencies through the wood chipper, just shredding them and just really disrupting it. And it just seems like the deep state is just throwing up their hands or they're in chaos. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, what's your take on that?
Yeah. No, I'm surprised by that too. I mean, he seems to really have put them on the back foot. Um, the contrast with his first term, or the beginning of his first term, could not be more stark. You think about it, like from the beginning, or even before he took office, there's this constant, um, these constant there's a constant stream of accusations hurled against him. Again, he was accused of being some kind of a Manchurian candidate, a puppet of the Russians, and it never ended, as you remember. It just was constant. They were always on the offensive, and they seemed to be very confident too that they were going to take him out. Um, Now, then, of course, that did fail, but they just went on to other things. We had the lawfare, all the lawsuits that were brought against him, and there was a great deal of confidence that he would be in prison. And then, of course, during the leading up to the campaign and during the campaign, he was constantly accused of being, a fascist. The democracy itself was in danger, and now that he's in power and he's actually, wielding his executive power very aggressively, you get some of that language, but it just seems to be very muted. It's just like they almost seem to be stunned. They just don't. They're on the defensive, and I figured that they probably had some plan. There's going to be Russia hoax 2 or something, and maybe it'll emerge later. Maybe they're working on it, but they don't seem to have it now. It seemed like they didn't really have anything prepared. It seems like they had their plans A, B, C, and but they didn't have a plan D. That's what we're looking at. I'm really quite amazed. Um, Now it's very hard. I'm not going to make any predictions about how this is all going to end. Things it could end up very badly for Trump. I think the economy is again the main issue for most people. And again, I think these tariffs will have a negative effect. And then even absent the tariffs, like if let's say you lifted all the tariffs tomorrow, there's always a chance because of these very severe economic imbalances that we have in this country, that we could go into a very severe recession. And there could be a major financial crisis, something similar to 2008 and 2008, or even worse. And even if that was it would be unfair to blame Trump for that because typically when you look at a recession or a financial crisis, the seeds for that were sown many years earlier. But it's just like whoever's in office at the time gets blamed. That's just a fact of U.S. politics. So he could, right now I think he's popular. People like to see a vigorous president, have a sense that somebody's actually doing something. Um, but if the economy really craters, then they could all turn on him, and then the Democrats could come roaring back. It's just too early to say what's going to happen here.
Right. Do you believe that these tariffs will backfire pretty heavily on Trump? That we'll see some real severe inflation? I mean, and it's not something that just contained to the United States. This is something that will
Yeah,
affect global
right,
trade all around. It's a two-edged sword.
right.
It just
And then
everybody
other
will
countries can
suffer.
retaliate too. Like Canada already has, and China
Hmm.
has threatened to do so as well. Um, yeah, Um, I think there's no question that it will increase prices. It's a question of how much. I mean, there are benefits for domestic manufacturers. So we saw, of course, in Russia that a lot of uh, the economic sanctions in an odd way actually helped Russia, and Russia just, I think it allowed the Russians to build up their confidence, whereas before they thought, oh, we have to have these European products. We can't do that. We don't make it as well. They found out, hey, actually we can. So there's a potential for some of that. I don't know how much. I, I we're not going to escape negative consequences, economic consequences. It's just a question of how severe they're going to be. Now, it could even, like you're pointing out, this is global. We're talking about, the largest economies in the world, the U.S. and China. And when you throw a wrench into the works, you really put the global economy at risk. If you remember that the Great Depression was, let's say, aggravated, I think, quite severely by, what was it, the Smoot-Hawley Act, which was imposed tariffs, I think, on all imports. And it led to a global trade war, which helped to bring about a global recession. Or that's the way most economic historians see it. So there is a real risk here.
Right. Yeah, it's I'm kind of surprised at just these blanket tariffs. I understand if you want to protect certain types of
Mm-hmm.
industries in your own country to grow, to get to a point where they are competitive, if you want to protect your automotive industry or anything like this, but just a blanket tariff on everything doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, and
So I
right,
just,
especially when the objective to me isn't entirely clear, or it's not even clear. Like, for example, I was saying that I think Mexico can fix the immigration problem, and but the drug problem is just not so easy. Just say, hold a gun to their head and say, fix this. They may actually want to, and they just might not be able to. And then it's not clear to me that, again, that Canada is really guilty of anything. Maybe they are, and I'm just not aware of it. But it seems to me that this is part of his um, extraordinary campaign to make Canada the 51st state. I don't know.
is there any chance of that
I
happening?
don't see it.
Do
I
you
just
think he
don't
could?
think so. Um,
Well, why would he want that anyways, right?
yeah,
I mean, Canada is if Trump is not, doesn't like the progressives. Canada is quite a progressive
right.
country.
Somebody pointed out it
It
would
would
be a
just
boon to the Democrats,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah, I don't think he's thought it through. I mean, this is the thing with Trump. I mean, I I think he has a lot of good, healthy instincts. He's right to, again, to regard the neocons with suspicion. I guess it's more than that, with hostility. Um, but he needs to know the facts, and he doesn't. He often doesn't really have a very grasp of the facts and all the possible consequences of his actions. He tends to act impulsively, and and unfortunately, um, these errors of judgment, I think, could really undo some of the good work that he is carrying out now.
Right. You made a good point though that with Russia, we put all these sanctions on Russia, and now Russia's economy is booming. It's improving. Now, I know sanctions and tariffs aren't the same thing, but they're kind of in the same bag.
Yeah.
They're punitive. They limit trade. So, is there a possibility? Well, first of all, how did Russia do it exactly? How did they come out so strong after being sanctioned by the United States and the Western international rules based
Yeah.
order? How did that happen? And is it possible that we could see there's some type of revitalization internally, sense of pride in manufacturing
Yeah.
or whatever in the United States? Is that
Well,
possible?
I think it
Or
is. It is possible. It's not. You can't say that it is. That's one of those intangibles. You're talking about the human spirit, and um,
I don't trust our
yeah, I
spirits,
know.
to be
Part of the
honest. That's
problem
the
is
thing.
that, well, let's say in the case of Russia, it became a matter of necessity. I mean, it was something that was imposed from the outside. So this is just like, okay, before maybe I'm a businessman, I just like the chance of the competition from Europe is too strong. People already have this kind of this long-standing bias in favor of Western European goods, and it's just going to be too difficult to overcome. But then, bam, it's cut off, and you say, well, okay, it'd be stupid not to try. There's a necessity, and then also I think in the case a certain amount of patriotism too. It's like, okay, yeah, they're trying to destroy us. Well, we're going to show them what we can do. Now, in the case of Trump's tariffs, it's just like so much that the U.S. does. It's expressed in punitive terms. That's the way he's talking about. We're punishing these people. It's not he isn't going out and making that case, hey, American industry. Maybe he is to some extent, but it doesn't seem to be the main focus of the rhetoric that I'm hearing from him and his administration. Now, the stated reason is really punishment. It's punitive. Now, yeah, I mean, if he, again, I think that might be a good approach if he starts to say that, hey, look, we have let our industry just ebb away. This is a chance, everybody, to build it up. Hey, it's going to cost us something. We're going to have to tighten our belts, but we'll become that great industrial power that we once were. We won't be dependent on China for everything. Let's do this. Let's buy American. I think you do get some rhetoric from like that, but maybe that's something he needs to play up even more. And it's possible. I mean, you can, especially if businesses understand that this is long term. See, this is the other risk. It's just sort of, it came out of left field. And a lot of businesses are looking like, what's going on here? Maybe these are going to be reversed in 3 months or a year. And businesses don't like that uncertainty. If they're going to make a major investment, like in a whole new industry, a whole new branch of an industry, they need to believe that the conditions that are the favorable conditions that exist today will exist well into the future. And I think that's probably one of the major problems with the approach that he's taking now. He's just saying, we're doing this. These are punitive tariffs. If they, meet our conditions, then we'll take them off. And who knows? He may do that in 3 months or a year, or even 2 years. That's just really not enough. I think if you're talking about rebuilding an industry, you got to say, okay, we're putting these in place. We're giving you this, this breathing spell industry, and you're going to have these protective tariffs for the next 5 years or 10 years or something like that. And then I think you would see a lot of investment in those industries. Now I'm sure they're just on the sidelines, wondering what the hell is going on. So I don't think we're going to see the economic benefits of the sort that we saw in Russia.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I promise to only take 1 minute of your time. If you're using AI, please consider checking out my website, novlisky.io. Right now, we're in the middle of this AI arms race. Nobody knows what's the best AI to use. Yesterday was OpenAI, and everybody's talking about DeepSeek. This is great for us as consumers of AI, but what's not so great is having to jump from platform to platform. You don't want to have to sign up for a monthly subscription on OpenAI and then move over to Anthropic and then move over to DeepSeek. So what we've built here at Novlisky is an AI hub. It allows you to access hundreds of AI models. We update them as soon as a new model comes out. It is integrated into our system, and you can use them all under one platform. And another thing that's so great about this website is that you can easily use multiple models at the same time to compare which is best for whatever use case. So, for example, I'm going to use Anthropic and GPT-4 at the same time. So I get side-by-side results. I use this in my work every single day. I think you'll find it incredibly useful. There's tons of customizations. We have an iOS and Android native app as well, so you have seamless synchronization across all devices. So please check it out. I think it's something you'll find incredibly useful. There are no subscription fees, no rate limits. I guarantee you it's going to save you money, and it's just going to keep you on top of all AI releases. Right, right. I mean, that's exactly what we were just saying earlier. It's just like there's no goal. Like if you're saying that this is an industry we need to protect to grow and be competitive, so we're putting tariffs for this industry to protect this industry so we can grow it domestically. Then there's a goal outlined. There's something there, but you're right. It is just punitive. Like he just talks in these terms like these countries are taking advantage of us without really explaining how they're taking advantage of us. We're engaged in trade. Right, we're just spending more. Right. Buying their stuff. We're not exporting more. It's not really the other country's fault. Right. I don't understand that point. And we're talking about Russia. the sanctions were unifying. I think that was one of the really big effects of it. It unified Russia. It gave them a sense of pride and nationality. Like, we are under attack.
Hmm.
We got to get together. And we, there was a real, I think, energy that was driving here. Here in the United States with these tariffs, it's going to be hotly debated the whole time. Like, hey, this is hurting us and the tariffs. We don't want this. It's going to cause division with
Yeah.
the U.S. It's going to be the opposite of a unifying effect. I think it's going to cause a very divisive effect within the United States, which will make it really hard to kind of have a general overall drive. We're talking about the intangible, the idea of the American spirit or the Russian spirit. I just don't see this
Yeah, right.
bolstering
It's
the
not that
American
it couldn't
spirit. So
happen, but the way that it's being done, it doesn't, create that. It's chaotic and it's punitive and yeah, and it is going to lead to division. There are some winners from this. Clearly there are going to be some businesses that are happy in the short run. It's just like, um, but there are going to be a lot of losers, and consumers are clearly going to be among those losers.
right. I'm just thinking, just everything. Think about, I mean, price of housing. We're talking about, lumber coming in from Canada. These basic inputs, just it's just going to. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the markets agree with you. It's been a bloodbath, since Trump made this announcement that's going through. So we see how it all plays out. But I think people need to brace themselves for not only in the U.S. I mean, you think Canada and Mexico, they both need to brace themselves. It's going to be tough times ahead economically and potentially and probably globally. Trump is also talking about doing this to the EU, not even ruling out sanctioning not sanctioning putting tariffs on the UK. So it's going to be a rocky economic road.
Yeah,
We'll see how this plays out. Maybe there's some tricks up his sleeve that I don't understand. But
yeah,
right now, I have that same
yeah,
assessment. I think that this is going to be pretty damaging to the world economy.
right.
And maybe with he's using it for leverage, and they won't last that long, and something else will come into play. But we'll see. But the one thing that I do think is good, and I think you'll agree with me, is the cutoff of USAID,
Hmm.
USAID. I always call it USAID, but I guess it stands for the Agency of International Development or
Yeah,
something
you
like
can
that.
call it USAID. I think
US.
that's not unusual. That's just
Okay.
right. Um,
Yeah. How significant do you think this is? I know it
right.
was a 90-day suspension. Do you think that this is going to continue further on? I
Well,
mean, this is a huge pillar of U.S. Hegemony. Of the unipolar moment. This goes hand in hand with Marco Rubio saying
yeah,
basically
right,
that
right,
the U.S. unipolar moment is
right,
over, and this is
right,
what we're looking at, and that's exciting for me.
right.
That's exciting. Tariffs, not so much, but what's your take?
Yeah. Well, again, like I was saying, it turns out that USAID played a pivotal role in a lot of these color revolutions. Again, not directly, but by funding other NGOs like IRI and similar, basically regime change agencies and NGOs. So yeah, it has a large budget. It's something I think $25 billion. Now, some of it goes to the innocuous stuff, like to improving a sawmill somewhere. Like, well, again, that's what our neighbor was involved in. But apparently, a lot of it is um, about maintaining and spreading Western-led global hegemony. So, yeah, it is significant. It really is. I mean, we find there was a reason that Putin actually kicked out USAID in 2012, and then later Lukashenko kicked him out from Belarus when he realized what was going on. Again, it seemed like great. I have this agency in here, just helping out local businessmen or whatever, and they do some of that stuff, but obviously there was a lot more, that was quite a bit more insidious. So, it's not entirely clear why he went after USAID. But when you look at, again, like Rubio's comments and the decision to put it in the State Department, it looks like maybe he really is going after, the old neocon way of doing things. And said, yeah, no more of these color revolutions, no more of this nonsense. That's not what we do anymore. I hope so. And I think that may really be the intention.
with USAID, is this something separate than like the cutoff of, when we were sending aid to Israel and Egypt? Every country had their aid cut off. Was that USAID that we're talking
No.
about, or is this a different agency? So
Um,
there's two separate things.
yeah, I think it's not considered. It wasn't. Well, I can't say for sure. I actually don't know. They, there was a cutoff in foreign aid, and I guess a lot of that is channeled through the State Department. So I think that's actually basically where it was shut down. Now, USAID is independent of the State Department now, but they're talking about putting it under the State Department. So
Okay.
I think, I may be wrong, but I think that money was not affected by that freeze. But I may be incorrect
So
about that.
for a country like Israel, are they getting money from USAID, or is it something directly from the State Department that isn't associated with it?
Yeah, well, they get
Because
okay. Israel gets straight out, just direct transfers of money, and then all kinds of direct military assistance. As far as NGOs in the country, I have no knowledge of that.
I'm asking that because if we do, suspend all this foreign aid to all these countries, no
Yeah.
one giving money to South Africa, or no one giving to Ukraine. Basically, every country in the world has USAID,
Uh-huh.
or some type of money from the United States. If everything gets cut off except for Israel, isn't that going to be just make things kind of apparent for the population? Like, hey, why does Israel still get it?
Yeah.
What is this really America first? Because we did we
Yeah.
did it and we were so good, but like, oh, but this one
Yeah,
country,
well, that's
you
okay.
know?
That's always been the exception, and I think maybe the fatal flaw in so much of Trump's approach to things. We've always seen that. There's the Zionist exception. There's the Israeli exception.
So you think that will
Oh
continue?
yeah,
But surely but I think the narrative, the perception of it, I think people will start to realize like, why does this country or is the only country in the world that's getting this
right. Well, they've long been, I think, the leading recipient of aid, from the U.S. and
right.
but it'll just be that much more obvious, if they're just the only one plus Egypt. I'm surprised that Jordan was cut off. I think the earliest reports were that Jordan would continue to receive aid because Jordan is very much in the same position that Egypt is. They're a neighboring country that was basically bought off by the U.S. To to end resistance to Israel. And yeah, part of the deal is okay. Yeah, this is not popular with our people, but if you keep on sending us money, we can kind of keep a lid on things here in our country, in Egypt or Jordan. Now, Jordan, we've talked about it earlier, more than 50% of the population is Palestinian. And if there are, the king of Jordan has been able to maintain, his rule over the country, I think in large part because of the economic support he gets from the West, especially from the U.S. But if that ends, um, that might just be, a pot that boils over. I mean, we may see, a revolution there. So again, I'm
Right.
surprised that aid was cut off to Jordan. We'll see if that changes.
Right. And Trump is also talking about moving US troops out of Syria,
Yeah,
which I think
yeah.
is something that Israel is afraid of. So I'm just wondering, is Israel now maybe getting a little bit scared about Trump? There was a lot of cheering
Yeah,
about like, yes, Trump's back in, now the gloves are off and Trump is going to save
yeah,
us.
and
And
we have seen evidence of that. I mean, there have been policy changes that are, again, the very, very minor restrictions that Biden imposed have been lifted by Trump. Um,
right.
yeah, but yeah, we're
But
contradictory signals. You're right. Like in the case of the ceasefire, Netanyahu's still saying that, yeah, I'm going to end this basically. And the Americans are behind me. But then there was some leak, I think, or something that was published in the Israeli press that said, no, the Americans are pressuring him to go through with the whole thing and to negotiate the next phase of it. So we'll see what happens. It's again, just never forget that it was in good part the Zionist megadonors that put Trump in charge. So it's hard to believe that he's going to do anything that really fundamentally opposes their interests. But Israeli society itself is divided over the ceasefire. And because they do want to bring all the hostages home, and to bring them all home, you have to continue with it. You have to actually go into the next phase because there are still a lot of hostages or prisoners of war. Often the more accurate description. Some are hostages, some are prisoners of war that Hamas is holding, and they're not going to release them unless the ceasefire continues and they agree to the next phase, and they actually complete their withdrawal of forces from Gaza.